Hey guys, welcome back, it's Meg. Today we are going to be talking about where Mistweaver is headed in a playstyle sense as we go from Shadowlands to Dragonflight. In the past we have been strong maintenance healers and that has not changed. We still have Ancient Teachings, Renewing Mist, and Essence Font, but now we do have access to more maintenance healing, specifically things that are damage to healing abilities. We also have procs like Misty Peaks, Dancing Mist, and Rapid Diffusion. All of those are going to be contributing to our maintenance healing. And then when it comes to damage to healing abilities, Ancient Concordance and Awakened Feline aid in that, with our Spinning Crane Kick and our Blackout Cleave Kick. Most of our damage still comes from AoE and Cleave, but we do have higher single target damage now due to the Feline Talents and Tiger Palm striking twice instead of cleaving. When we talk about cooldowns and what losing Fallen Order is like, with the current tuning on beta, our main cooldown is Chi. This means that our celestial windows are much more important to execute properly, and this is also where a majority of our throughput comes from for burst damage, as well as where a significant portion of mana positive or mana neutral healing comes from. This means we are either gaining mana through Spirit of the Crane during the celestial window and spending less than we gain, therefore we are mana positive, or we are spending the same or close to the same amount of mana as we are gaining, and therefore mana neutral. Either way, this cooldown is the most mana efficient spell that we have, and I did do a video on Chi and how to properly utilize it, where the healing comes from, as well as the rotation. With Awakened Feline and Ancient Concordance, positioning for Feline Stomp is going to be something that a lot of Mistweavers are going to have to get used to. Prior to Dragonflight, we had minimal requirements on positioning outside of the normal melee things, dodging frontals, dodging swirlies, but now we also do have to take advantage of our Feline Stomp as it interacts with a lot of our kit and ultimately is something that we need to be in as much as possible. This means we are tied more to melee than we were before, and we're much more reliant on being in specific places. We also have to be more aware of where we are placing Feline, as well as not sending it into a nearby pack and therefore pulling it. But we also need a better sense of the routing for cooldown timings and our party's positioning for things like applying the Essence Font hot with Feline, or if you see that you're not able to get everyone when you need it, you can use Essence Font as well. Situational awareness is something that we required before because we were in melee, but there are just a few more things to keep track of as we head into Dragonflight. I call this floating, but what I'm referring to is the ability to heal while outside of melee if we get pushed out or separated from the group for whatever reason. In Shadowlands we had a pretty easy time with this, especially in conjunction with Fallen Order, but we are punished much harder now due to the loss of that ability, as well as the addition of Feline Stomp and the current tuning around Vivify and Revival. We talked about it earlier where Chi is pretty much our only cooldown now when it comes to throughput, and it does not require melee range, but it is significantly more effective while in melee. So while we can still keep people tops enough by floating, it'll be significantly harder on our mana pool, and it'll be something that we want to avoid as much as possible, whereas before it was more of a convenience thing. But we will definitely feel it in our mana pool, as well as trying to stabilize after floating for too long. It is something that is not really going to go too well with the new way that Mistweaver is playing. We did talk about this a bit earlier when we were talking about Chi, but most of our mana save does come from properly utilizing Chi and other defensives, as well as stops and things like that, but we are now a bit more reliant on our group to be using their defensives and their stops as well. This was always a thing in higher levels in terms of Mythic Plus, but Mistweaver always handled pugging very well, in the sense that we had a lot of tools for crowd control when pugs were maybe not using their own toolkits, as well as high throughput to make up for mistakes that wouldn't outright kill you. Mistweaver has had some changes that, in my opinion, will make pugging on Mistweaver harder than it was before, but this time it is more about performance than it was community perception, as it was in Shadowlands. Mistweaver still has a lot of tools that will be able to help pugs. We have access to Ring of Peace, Paralysis, Leg Sweep. We also have a kick now, as well as access to Song of Chi, and we generally just have a lot of tools to help pugs that are not stopping things, not kicking things, or just not using their toolkit to the full extent. So Mistweaver does have a lot of access to crowd control, But again, ultimately there is only so much you can do as a healer sometimes, especially in these dungeons where sometimes one kick is all it takes for the pull to go wrong or for a wipe to happen. These dungeons are a bit more punishing to groups that lack communication, but again, that's not a Mistweaver specific issue, that is just the state of these dungeons and the state of pugs in general. Something that I did want to touch on too in regards to our new talents and the talent trees, something I am really looking forward to is how diverse a lot of the builds are going to end up being. In Shadowlands, the only things that we really swapped around with was using either dampen or diffuse, and thankfully I've got at least 4 builds that I will be willing to play in various situations in Dragonflight dungeons. I want to say that I'll probably go up to 6 after the next round of beta testing, but I am very excited for how diverse our talent builds are going to be and how different all of them play. This is also not unique to Mythic Plus. In Raid, there is at least 2 or 3 builds that we have been playing with, and that all of them are having different strengths in different situations. So I am looking forward to how our talents have evolved since Shadowlands, and I'm very excited to see all of the different things that we are going to be able to experiment with different affix sets, different dungeons, and different raid bosses. I do have some concerns when it comes to the readiness of Mistweaver. Currently things like Generous Pour and Close to Heart are not implemented properly. Those are the class avoidance and healing auras. Mistweaver does have access to both of them, but generally it is a concern that I have for the spec. We do also have a bit of a DPS loss at the moment because there is a bug with our auto attacks and our auto swings being reset by Instant Vivify mainly, as well as Enveloping Mist, and this will result in a bit of a damage loss. I guess my main concerns about Mistweaver aren't specific to Mistweaver and its general concern over the readiness of Dragonflight. I am a bit anxious when it comes to certain tunings on things and generally just how buggy everything is, but hopefully these things will be addressed when we get into launch and over the next couple of weeks before Mythic Plus and Mythic Raid starts. The TLDR is pretty much that I am very happy with the direction the Mistweaver is being taken. They are staying true to the melee healer aspect of things, while also implementing ways for us to get extra damage and be rewarded for playing the intended way. I think that this is healthy for the spec and it encourages the proper playstyle, as well as the tuning numbers I'm pretty happy with. There are a couple of things that I would change, but generally I am pleased with how things have been going. We also have a good toolkit for Mythic Plus and for Raid, and I think that we are well equipped on handling a lot of the situations that arise in both of these forms of content. As we transition from Shadowlands into Dragonflight, I do believe that Mistweaver is going to become a bit more difficult and there is going to be a learning curve. There's less room for error and much more to pay attention to in terms of our own positioning as well as thinking about cooldown timers, because we will not have a cooldown for every pull like we did in Shadowlands. I think that opening up Mistweaver to have a higher skill ceiling and a form of skill expression in Raid and in Mythic Plus overall is healthy for the spec, and I am looking forward to Dragonflight as a Mistweaver main. If you guys have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on Twitch, Twitter, or Discord. I hope that this video was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.